I would like to know how many of my products I sell very frequently versus just sometimes versus almost not at all. Well, for that we need to take each product, count the number of orders for that product and assign it to one of my buckets. And of course, we need to know how big are these buckets. Well, not frequent could mean from 0 to 100 orders, and sometimes could be from 100 to 200, and everything above could be, well, very frequent. Now, these buckets we sometimes refer to as bins, and when we visualize this in a column chart, well, then we have a histogram, a tool that every data analyst needs because you can get to super useful insights about the distribution of your data. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you how to set it up, and most importantly, how we can let the user choose the size of these bins, which is more tricky than I thought. And even if you're not interested in histograms at all, this video contains many super useful tricks. So let's get started. Welcome to How to Power BI. My name is Bas, and if this is the very first time for you visiting this channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all of my videos in which I share everything I know about Power BI. Over here, I already have a column chart with one column, and it shows the number 1003, which is the total number of products that I have in this data set for which I have sales. All right, now, what I would like to have is an understanding, how is this distributed? How many of these products do I sell very frequently, not so frequently, versus almost not at all? Now, what we're going to do as a starting point is show a breakdown by all of the products, and we're going to count the number of sales orders that we have for each product. Okay, so we can get rid of the count of the product key. So I'm going to remove that one. I'm going to add over here on the y-axis the number of sales orders. And here on the x-axis, I want to have a breakdown by the different products. So I'm going to add the product name. Okay, now here you see for each product on the x-axis, the number of orders that we have for that product. Now, you see we have here also a horizontal scroll bar, and well, it's quite many products. So is this really helpful? Not so helpful to get a better idea of how the data is distributed. Now, what we could do is, well, create buckets, where we say, all right, we are going to have a bucket from 0 to 50 orders. How many products do we have that fall inside of that bucket? And then from 50 to 100, how many products do we have that fall inside of that bucket? And that will give us a better understanding of how our data is distributed. Now, one way in which we could do that is by going to our product table and adding a column. However, you will see that is kind of static, which will not be ideal for what we are going for, but maybe as a first step, let's start there. Okay, I'm going to go here to the data view. I have here my product table selected, and we're going to add a new column. Now here I want to calculate the number of sales orders that we have for each product. So I'm going to call this one sales orders count. And this is going to be equal to, now I already have a measure that's called number of sales orders, press enter, and that gives me a new column with the number of sales orders for each product. Now, that's the exact number, but I just want to assign it now to a bucket. Now, we could use an if or a switch, or maybe to keep it easy, we can also go for a round function. I can also round it down, and when I round down to 100, so minus 2 digits, then this 193 would become 100. The 65 will become 0, and the 218 will become 200. So that's going to be the beginning point of each bucket that is 100 in size. Okay, now I'm going to use a round down function. The number is given by the number of sales orders, and over here I want to have minus 2 number of digits. So you see if I have minus 1, then 193 over there will become 190, all right? And if I do now minus 2, then that one will become 100. Exactly, and now we have kind of a bucket. All right, so now we have our starting points for our buckets, for our bins. So maybe a better name would be not sales order count, but bins. All right, and now with that new bins column, we go back to the report view. And here I want to, first of all, have a breakdown by these bins, these buckets. So I'm going to replace product name with that new column, which we have in our product table, all right? And for each bucket, we want to know not the number of sales orders. No, we want to know how many products do fall inside of that bucket. So I'm going to take out the number of sales orders. All right. And now I'm going to go here to my sales table, take the product key. So there it is. And I would like to have not the count, but the distinct count. Okay. Now, and that tells me how many products in my sales table fall inside of each bucket. But the sorting is a little bit off. It is now sorting by the count of product key, and I want it to sort by, well, the bins. So bins, and I want to have it in ascending order. All right. Now, that gives us now an overview of the distribution already of how many products do I have that sell not so frequent versus just sometimes versus very frequent. Okay. Now, this is nice. However, it's kind of static because maybe you're missing still valuable insights that you could get if you, well, would make more bins, well, more granular breakdown. Now, how could I achieve that? Well, for that, I would need to go back again to the data view, and then instead of having buckets, bin sizes of 100, well, we might want to change that to 50 or 25. However, it's always static. The user cannot make that change. And that's the thing that we're going to solve next, which also means we cannot do it with a calculated column because that only refreshes when we refresh the data set. So that's not going to work. So we have to find a different solution. Now, let's get started. All right, step one, we're going to add a new table with just one column that's going to have all of the starting points for our bins. All right, now to do that, we just go here to modeling, new table. And this one is actually really easy. We just are going to say bin start. That's the name of this table. All right. And we're going to generate a series. Now, it's a series with the starting points for our bins. Now, let's say we're going to have at the most granular level, let's say bins of 25. So I'm going to start over here as the minimum point, 25. The end value, let's say we go all the way up to 1,000, and the incremental value is going to be the most granular step that you will want to choose from, 25 in my case. All right, and we're going to close the brackets. Now, what will this do? Well, let's have a look. I'm going to go and switch to the table view. Bin start is the table that I selected. And you see over here, we have just one column with values that make jumps of 25, 25, 50, 75, 100, all the way up to 1,000. Now, instead of calling this column value, maybe let's rename it to something more intuitive. This is going to be bin start. All right, now let's switch to the report view. And first, let's create a table so that we have an easy way to see if everything works. All right, let's make it a little bit bigger and put it right next to the other one. And now here on the right-hand side, I'm going to go to my new table, bin start. And you see, there's an aggregation icon right in front of it. But we don't want to aggregate it. We want to use that column to break down our columns, right? We want to use that later on the x-axis. So I'm going to select that field. And then here we have column tools, summarization. I'm going to put this one to do not summarize. Okay, and now we can grab it and just put it onto our table visual. Now you see we have jumps of 25, 25, 50, 75, 100. Okay, that's good. However, now I would like the user to be able to choose what are the starting points. And when the user says 50, well, it should go from 50 to 100, 150 to 100. If the user says 100, it should jump from 100 to 200 to 300. Okay, now, first, we need, well, the ability for the user to choose that value. So that means numeric parameter. So I'm going to go all the way to the top to modeling, new parameter, and this is going to be a numeric range parameter. Now, numeric range, the name of this parameter, well, is going to be the bin size. Data type, whole number is okay. Then the minimum is going to be, let's say 25. The maximum, let's put it to 100 for now. And increments of, let's say 25. Now the default, let's put it to 50 and also add a slicer to the page. Okay, let's click on create. All right, there we have a slicer from which the user can choose the bin size value. Now, if I slide a little bit to the right, you see we have 50, 75, 100, and all the way to the left is 25. Okay, now let's put it to 50. And now I'm going to take that slicer and put it right above our table. Okay, now when I have here 50 selected, I would need to see here 50, 100, 150. How can we do that? Well, we need a measure that's going to filter bin start, so that when we have here 50, all the other ones that are not in the increments of 50 disappear. Now, we're going to write that measure, so let's add a new measure. All right, now let's call this measure BINS filter, all right, because we only want to keep the relevant ones, and then we can work with variables, makes it a little bit easier. And the first one, let's call it bin size. Okay, now that's the easy one, because for that we just created that numeric range parameter. And when you create that numeric range parameter you see over there, it also creates automatically a new measure, bin size value. So we just refer to that one, bin size value. Okay, now that's the first one. Now let's create the second one. So here another variable, and this is then the bins to keep. Now how can we figure out which bin starting points we want to keep? Well, first of all, we need to know, well, the bin starting point. So for that, we can use a selected value function, which returns just the value when there's one value. And here we can then say, oh, we have bin start table, bin start column, all right? And we want to check that value and then divide it by the bin size that is selected, okay? So that variable that we just created above it. Now let's see what this returns before we continue. Okay, so I'm going to return bins to keep. Okay, now here we have a bins filter. I'm going to add it to our table. Now, pay attention, bin size that's currently selected is 50. So we have 25 divided by 50 is a half. 50 by 50 is 1. And for 75 is 1.5. Every time when we have the ones that we want to keep, is always an integer. 1, 2, 3, 4. So when we make jumps of a 50. And when I would set this to, let's say, 100, okay, then we have only these integers when we have here 100, 200, 300, etc. Okay, now I'm just going to put it back to 50. So with that knowledge, how can we then, well, return true for when we have over here 1 or 2 or 3? Well, let's go back and let's make that change. Okay, so I'm going to select that bins filter measure, and over here I'm going to check if this is equal to, all right, and now I'm just going to copy it, all right, and I'm going to see if this is equal to the rounded value of this. So here I'm going to round it, and then for the second argument, well, just 0, close the bracket, and now let's see when it returns true or false. Now again, 50 is the selected bin size, and you see it only returns true for 50, 100, 150. Okay, if I set this to 100, it only returns true for 100, 200, 300. Okay, so that's the whole logic, because now the only thing that we need to do is go back once more. Now here we can add another variable. Let's call this one bins filter, which is then going to be equal to, well, we want to check if bins to keep is true, right? So bins to keep. And you don't have to say it's equal to true, well, because it already returns true or false. Now, if it's true, then we want to return a 1, otherwise we want to return a 0. Now, also important, don't forget to update what is after the return statement. So that's going to be bins filter. All right, and that is the final measure that we can use as a filter. And you see, instead of true and false, we have now 1s and 0s. Then we can select the table visual, open the filter pane, and here we want to use bins filter measure. Now, it is already added, so therefore it shows already here. And I want to say that it needs to be equal to 1 and apply the filter. Okay, so now we see we have the starting points that make jumps of 100, 100, 200, 300, because the bin size is 100. If I set this to 50, then we make jumps of 50. If I set it to 25, we make jumps of 25. So that is already working. So we have a dynamic way to choose the bucket size and link it to the breakdown of a visual. All right. Now, the next thing. The next thing is that we need to count how many products fall inside of each bucket. All right. So for that, again, a new measure. So let's add a new one. All right. Now let's call this one number of products within bin. Now, this is going to be equal to, well, first of all, we need to know the start and ending point of the bin that we're looking at, of the selected bin. All right, so first variable, min bin, or we can say bin size min. All right, that sounds a bit more professional. And here we can use a selected value function because we want to check if there's only one value and then return that value. And we are interested in the starting point. Okay. Now, then we also need to know the ending point. So we have bin size and then max, or we could also call them start. And so this one, start, start, and this one, end. And this is going to be equal to, well, bin size start plus the value of the size of the bins, which we can get from the measure bin size value. Okay, so now that we have the variables for the start and ending points for each single bin, we need to go row by row over all of the products in the product table and then calculate the number of orders that we have for the product. And if it's within the bin range, then return 1, and otherwise a 0. All right, now let's see how that works. I'm going to add another variable. Let's call this one sales number. And then we need to iterate. So I'm going to use this SUMX. And we need to iterate over all of the products. So I'm going to iterate over the product name or the product key. All right, and then we can calculate the number of orders. Now, to do that, well, let's wrap it inside of if, and we want to check if the number of sales orders bigger than or equal to the bin size start. Okay. Now at the same time, so ampersand, ampersand, and another condition needs to be true because the number of sales orders also needs to be lower than, well, the ending point. So bin size end. Okay. Now, if this is true, then I want to return a 1. If this is not true, then I want to return a 0. So if it falls within the bucket for that product, it returns a 1, right? And then for all of these products that return a 1, then we can just sum up the ones, and that gives us the count, the number of products that fall within the bucket that we are looking at in the visual, within the filter context. Okay. Now, let's then return over here that last variable, so sales number. Okay, now let's indent this so that it looks a little bit better. And let's now add it to the table. Okay, now let's take that table and make it a bit wider so that we can see the numbers a bit better. Now I made one mistake, and that is I should have started at 0 for the bin starting range. So I go back here to that table and update the starting point to 0. All right, so now we have there the first bucket as well. Bin start 0, so meaning the bucket that goes from 0 to 50. We have 153 products within that bin. And then we have 50 to 100, etc. Okay, now what is actually happening to the 50 itself when somebody has, well, count of orders of exactly 50? Well, does it fall inside of the first bucket or the second bucket? Well, we have to make a choice, otherwise we could be double counting some products. So let's go back, and here we can just say, all right, we have the bin size and, well, at the bin size value minus 1. All right, so that we go from 0 to, well, 50 minus 1, 49. And then we go from 50 to 100 minus 1, 99. Okay, so then here we have number of sales orders is equal to or bigger than. Okay, so that's fine. And then here is smaller than or equal to bin size end. All right, so now we can just slide this one to the left or to the right, and the number of products that fall within that bin nicely updates. Okay, so that is working. So what is the next step? Well, now we can use this, but then on that column chart from before. So let's get rid of that table. We don't need that anymore. I'm going to put that slicer right next to a bar chart. Okay, and then I take over here the bar chart, and here I want to, first of all, update what's on the x-axis. All right, so I'm going to go here to the builds panel. Now, instead of having that bins column that we added all the way at the beginning, I'm going to remove that one. And now we're going to have here bin start, that new table that we added after. All right, and here, instead of the count of products from before, we are going to have here that last measure that we wrote, the number of products within the bin. Okay. Well, that's it. Now, it looks a little bit weird because the sorting is still off. So I'm going to change that. So sort axis by bin start. And we want to have it in ascending order. Okay. Now, here we need to make sure that the filter on the bin size is still applied. So you see over here, that's not the case just yet. And I need to, well, go here to the fields panel, the data fields panel, and then here we can take the BINS filter measure, drag it onto the filters for that visual, and say that it needs to be equal to 1, and click on apply. All right, so now it should work. If we drag the handle to the right for the bin size, you see, we make jumps now of 50. Once more, and we make jumps of 75, 100. Okay, so we got that to work. Okay, now I'm gonna put it back to 50. However, you see, it also shows me over here blanks, well, for where I don't have any number count. So let's make it a small change. And so I'm going to go back here to the number of products within the bin. And here, instead of returning 0, I just wanna, well, return a blank, or I can just leave it out and it returns blank by default. Okay, perfect. So that is working. Now, what still bothers me a little bit is that, well, here it's not straight away clear for the user that that first bucket where it says 0 is from 0 to 50 and then 50 to 100. It needs a little bit of explanation, right? So maybe we can do a better job. Now, how can we now change that from 0 to 50? Well, for that, we would have to go back to the data view, then go to that bin start table, and then over here, maybe create an extra column. Call it bin label. And then whenever we have over here 0, we could say 0 to 25, 0 to 50, etc. However, the thing is, that would again be static because it doesn't react to any slicer selection. So that will not get us there. Now, so we have to think of a different solution. What we could do is that we make use of custom labels so that we just get rid of the x-axis entirely. Now, let's do that as a starting point. And so I take over here the chart, go to the formatting options. I'm going to get rid of the x-axis. All right. And now, as the next thing, I want to have these labels on top, or I mean above the bars. Okay, so I go over here to data labels. Actually, I want to use total labels, but it's grayed out. So why do I want to have total labels? Because then we can use the data labels for showing the range from 0 to 25, 25 to 50, use them for a different purpose. Okay, now how do we get total labels to show up? Well, we can do the following. We can create a dummy measure. All right, so I'm going to add a new measure, and let's just call this one dummy. And this is going to just return a blank. Okay, so not 0 or anything like that, just a blank. Okay, so now I take that one, I'm going to add it to our visualization. Now, nothing really changed. However, what did change is over here that we can select total labels and we can turn it on. So I'm going to just turn data labels off for a second so that you can see the total labels. There you go. All right, so we have the total labels. Now we can use the data labels to show the range of the bin size. Okay, so for that, we can open up data labels, choose the series you want to add it to, now the number of products within bin, okay, and then we can say where we want to position it. We're going to have it inside base, all the way at the bottom. Then for the values, let's make them as small as possible, all right, and then here we want to use custom labels. Now, we need to write, again, a measure for this, all right? So a measure that returns the start and ending point, right? So we did this kind of already here, so I'm just gonna copy this part over and then create a new measure and then just paste that in. And this is going to be, well, our custom labels. Let's just call it that for now, custom labels. And over here, we want to have the starting point, the ending point, and, well, the label, right? So the label is going to be equal to bin size start. Then we're going to add maybe a minus sign, a hyphen. And then here we want to have the ending point. Okay, and that's what we want to return. Now with that measure, we can go back to the formatting options, data labels, number of products within bin is selected, show data labels, all right. And then here for the custom label, we're going to use that new measure that we just wrote, custom labels. Okay, and you see here at the bottom, we have the range showing up. Now, instead of having the x-axis there. Okay, and if we change this now to 75, okay, nicely updates. And to 100, perfect. Now, just one idea of how you could integrate that slicer that we now put right next to our visualization would be in the title, right? If we make this a little bit smaller, then you will see that, well, that timeline will disappear. However, if we make it too small, you get this filter icon. So we go here to properties, and then here under advanced options, you can turn responsiveness off. And also here for visual, this is the header we can get rid of, so that we actually only have a box for, well, for the number. And then here for the values, let's go and add a little bit of a background. So over here, maybe this color. Okay. And now I'm going to slide it right here. Now it still has a white background. So let's go here to size and style, turn the background off. All right. And now we just have to resize it so that it looks a little bit better and fits in with the rest, just like this. Now in the original visual, I had 3 dots there. So to get rid of those, we can go back to visual, title, and here we have the product count. That's the main title, subtitle, there it is. Now size, ... I'm just gonna get rid of that. Perfect. Okay, so now the user can come and just click in that box and change it to whatever number they like for the bin size, to get those extra insights of how the data is distributed, because sometimes the bin size can make a big difference. Now, if the user would choose a very small bin size, for example, 25, what could happen though is that, well, the range doesn't show anymore because it doesn't fit. Maybe that is something to keep in mind when you create this visualization. Now, the only way that they could figure it out now is by, well, hovering over it, right? So that would not be ideal. So maybe that option you would, well, want to take out. All right, and that's how you set up a histogram with dynamic bin sizes. Now, you see quite a few tricks that were integrated that you can also use for all different kinds of visualization tricks. Now, if you're interested in seeing more of these tricks, then check out these videos over here. I want to thank you for watching. If you have any questions, put them in the comment section below, and I hope to see you in the next video.